girls, and welcome to Season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening. In just a few short weeks, we will be back with all new interviews to finish Season 3 of Hey Girl. From now until Easter, we are sharing some of our favorite episodes from the archives. These interviews are worth discovering or listening to again. This week, we have Bethany's interview with Christina Hovestadt. Enjoy and keep being awesome for Jesus.
Okay, girls, I am so excited to introduce you to my brand new friend, Christina Hovestadt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. I always try and say, how did I connect with this guest? So you were brought to me by my husband because my husband's a huge sports fanatic, and he must have been watching the news or something and saw your recent job. Was it a promotion, or what would you say?
A job
promotion? Switch. Okay.
Yep.
And he was like, you need to look up this girl. I think she's a Christian. Like, you should look it up and see. And so I looked up your Instagram, and my favorite part is right away, I'm like, oh yeah, she's definitely a Christian. And so I knew it was a long shot, but I sent you a message, but you got right back to me. You were so sweet. And you're like, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come on. And so we joked that because of the nature of what you do for work, that this might be our highest male listener.
Nice. I love it.
Because you know that NFL is going to get like somehow tagged in because he titles all of them. So it's going to be, what do they call that? The bait, like when they put it in the title to get
like
people.
Clickbait.
Yes. They're going to use NFL to get like guys to listen to. It's terrible. We have no shame. No shame.
Yeah, and at least the guys will learn a lot about women, you know?
Seriously. This is like an opportunity for you to be like, all the things I always wanted you to know.
Yeah, exactly. From a Christian woman.
Yes. Well, before we get to your current job position, why don't we take some time, rewind the clock, and tell us a little bit about who you are and where you came from?
Yes. So I'm from the great state of Florida, and born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. Grew up in a sports family. My dad played football at Troy State. My mom played basketball. My sister played volleyball. And I was the only girl on my dad's flag football team.
Nice.
So, yeah, we always joke around and say that my dad wanted a boy because I played for 5 years, and we just used it as bonding time. And I was actually pretty good. I only scored one touchdown, but I still remember that like it was yesterday. I was a swimmer growing up, went to the Junior Olympics, and then I actually ended up playing college volleyball. So I just love sports in general. And so that's kind of my background is just I've always been very family oriented, come from a Colombian culture. My family's from South America. My mom's side is from South America. And I also grew up Catholic, actually. I grew up every Wednesday and every Sunday in the church for for as long as I can remember. I went through all the communion and confirmation and all the sacraments and stuff like that, but I never truly felt like I had a relationship with God. I just felt like it was it was just very traditional to me. And I felt judged a lot. And I'm just being honest. I know that's probably not the experience for everyone that's Catholic, but it was for me. When I was in high school, I was known as this, the good girl. I was an athlete, and I loved sports. I loved everyone around me. I was known as kind of like the innocent, quiet girl in school. And a sudden shift happened in that, and I laughed because God has done a crazy work in my life. But I ended up to be very transparent and to be very vulnerable. I lost my virginity to the school football player, the popular football player in school, and I was the popular volleyball player. And my parents found out, and it was the worst day of my entire life. I was in a a national travel volleyball practice, and my dad stormed into a closed practice and pulled me out by my arm. And I give all the details because I'm a very transparent person, and I think it can relate to some people, and I don't hold anything back. But he made me take a pregnancy test, and obviously I wasn't pregnant. But long story short, that changed my relationship with my family, because understandably so, they became very protective of me, even more so than they already were. I really didn't have any kind of life from my junior and senior year of high school. I mean, taking mileage on my car, like, where are you going? Who are you with? You're not going anywhere. It was really rough. And so the one place that they would allow me to go, not in my car because they took it away, but by riding my bike, was to the Catholic church. And so I would ride my bike there. Everyone else would go to mass. And there was this little room in the corner of the church for the prayer room where other people were praying the rosary. And I would just go in there and get on my knees and cry out to God. And it makes me tear up saying it. And I tell this story all the time. I would just feel the presence of God, and I would be honest with God. And I wasn't praying any specific prayer. I wasn't reciting anything out of the hymnal. I was just crying. And I was like, God, I'm messed up. I don't have a relationship with my family anymore. I don't know what to do. I know you're up there, but I don't know what that looks like. And literally every Sunday I would go there, ride my bike, and that's kind of where everything started. And in college, I ended up going to a non-denominational church. I played volleyball in college, and I was dating someone at the time. Him and I were really close. His parents, ironically, were pastors, but he was falling off. And I was trying to get closer to God, and I was like, oh, there's this kid and his parents are pastors. This must be how you live the Christian life. But he was falling off, and I didn't know. So we were living in sin. He was playing a sport. I was playing a sport in college. And I thought I was going to marry this guy. I dated him for 3.5 years. He ended up cheating on me and getting a girl pregnant. And literally, it broke my heart. Like, when I say broke my heart, it shattered it. And so I went to a non-denominational church. I went to the altar. And again, I just said, you know what? I'm done trying to do this my way. I want to do this, I want to do this your way. I want to give my life to you. And so I gave my life to the Lord. But prior to that, I will say that I forgot one of the most important things was when he cheated on me. And because we were living in sin, I actually ended up getting, thankfully, a curable sexually transmitted disease. And I also had to have surgery on my cervix because they said that I might have cervical cancer. So God had tried to wake me up many times before I ended up giving my life to him, and before my ex had cheated on me. And he was like, Christina, I'm knocking on your heart. Christina, I'm knocking on your heart. This isn't good for you. I want you to live for me. But I always ignored it. And I never really listened until that day that I was in the hospital, and I was going to have surgery on my cervix, and I was crying. And I said, God, if you have these results come back negative after this procedure, I promise you, I will always live for you 100%, please. And then I had the surgery. I got the phone call. You're 100% clear. There's no kind of cancer or anything. And that was it. And I went to church, and this woman came up to me, didn't know me. She prayed over me, and she said, you have something that you need to walk away from. Literally, I didn't know her at all. And God said, if you do that, then he has way better things in store for you in all areas of your life. And it's time that you're obedient. Went home, called my ex, and I verbatim said, I said, I need to break up with you because I need to get closer to God. And my life radically, that was when I was 20 years old. I'm 30 now. So my life radically changed after that.
Wow. I literally have like goosebumps. The power of, how God speaks to us. Just in that short story, how I love how your description of God kind of, trying to get your attention. But then for him to send a human being just to speak your very language and say, hey, this is what God's saying. Like, talk about a moment where it's kind of hard to deny. Exactly.
He knows us so well, and he's in the details of our lives. And one of my biggest pet peeves are when like people say, oh, it's such a small world. And I'm like, no, it's actually a really big world with a ton of people. And God is so strategic to send us the people that we need to speak life into us when we need them to do that. It's just up to us if we listen. And I had ignored for so long. And finally I was like, okay, I'm going to listen. I don't want to go through any of that or worse. So,
wow. So 20 years old, you've made this huge decision, walking away from a boyfriend of that's a big chunk of your life, 3.5 years. And what does transformation look like at that point for you?
Transformation. Honestly, when I first gave my life to the Lord, it was kind of complicated. I felt like, because I'm like, well, am I just supposed to change overnight, or how does it work to practically walk out a relationship with God? And so in hindsight, I just see where as many times as I had the opportunity to do the wrong thing or to kind of go with my flesh and what I wanted to do in friendships or relationships or in the way that I carried myself, that conviction of the Holy Spirit was so strong because I chose and made the conscious decision to seek God every day, that my desire to please God was so much more than the things that my flesh wanted to do, So transformation for me just really looked like a daily surrender of Christina's will and Christina's plans, and to say, God, I trust you. I have no idea what this looks like. This is so foreign to me, but I've seen you work and I've seen you speak to me in so many different ways that I can't deny. So just show me what to do today. And as long as I focused on that day, my life just changed literally every single day. Like I think there's this common misconception of like, we're going to miss God's will. And how do I know if I'm supposed to go left or right, or take this job, or marry this person, or have this friend, or say yes or no to this opportunity? And I think we overcomplicate a lot of it when God just says, focus on today, focus on me, love me and serve me and love the people that I put in your path. And you will never miss my will if you do that, because that's what God tells us to do, So yeah. So that's what transformation looks like to me, a daily surrender.
That's awesome. So you were 20 and now you're 30. So I love that description, that every day surrendering to Christ, but also not worrying about, am I in his will? Am I not in his will? So we mentioned this kind of off mic, but you had told me you also did student ministries. So we have that in common.
Yes.
And man, you want to talk about a ministry that the conversation of God's will comes up a lot, is students, and especially students who are coming up on graduation and they're thinking about college and the next thing. One of the conversations I've had a lot with students is this idea of, sometimes I think we have this image of like, we're standing at a crossroads and it's like a fork in the road, right? And we're like, well, do I go here or do I go there? And it's that question, okay, well, what is God's will? But we almost have this misconception, all using your word there, of that Jesus is like standing around the corner in one of those paths with a baseball bat, like ready to take us if we choose the wrong thing. And I've had so many just chats with students as they're making decisions, like, sometimes there is a right or wrong choice in life. Like there are things we come across that like clearly biblically, like this is right and this is wrong. So, but more times than not, the older I get, I find that I come to these crossroads or these forks in the road, and it's not God on one path and not on the other. It's him next to me saying, choose a path to walk with me down. But whichever path you choose, the point is not the path. The point is that you're walking with me.
So good. That is so good.
But I wonder for you then, what does these 10 years look like of loving people and following him? Because it's one thing for us to say it, and it's another thing to be like, oh, this is living it. Okay, this is harder than I thought.
Listen, literally, like I laugh because I'm like, we use this word misconception all the time, but there sure are a lot of them. especially about Christianity and about having a relationship with God, is people think it's boring. I know I did, to be honest. Before I started walking with God, I was like, well, that looks boring. I can't really do anything at all. People are going to judge me. Like, I just had all these ideas in my head about what that looked like. Yeah, it's not. Living for God is single-handedly the most fun, adventurous, expectant thing I've ever done in my entire life. Every single day is different. And I'm always like, wake up and I'm like, wow, what are you going to do today? Whose path are you going to cross me with? What words are you going to give me to say? Who are you going to send to me? What can I do for you? How can I help? Like, it's literally the most adventurous, exciting thing. And I just wish everybody could do it, would do it, and would make that decision, because everybody can, So the last 10 years for me, I'm naturally a very ambitious and driven person. I'm creative and I like to create things. I have kind of that entrepreneurial mindset. I'm very passionate about loving people well. And, when I first started off in this journey, I went to school for sports broadcasting. And, I grew up in a family of sports. So I was like, the best thing that I could do is go work and talk about sports all day. And I did have the privilege and opportunity to do that after college. But I realized it was a lot of what the desire to do that was very vain. And I didn't like it. I didn't feel like I was having much of an impact. I was in the newsroom, but to me, I just knew that wasn't where God had called me to be. And as soon as I realized that, which again was the conviction of the Holy Spirit of like, this is great. I've allowed you to experience this, but I have more for you. I started to pray about what the next steps were. And the Fellowship of Christian Athletes called and like, hey, we know you play volleyball. You love kids. We have a position open. Do you want to do it? And I'm sitting there I think I wasn't working the morning show at that time. I was working the nighttime show. And I literally sat at my desk before 6 p.m. and I prayed and I said, God, if you want me to take this new position, you're going to have to do something today. Like, I challenged him, which I don't really do anymore because that's not really what I should do. But I said, God, I need you to do something today and I need you to show me. And this was when I was like 21. So I'm new to this walk with God. So I'm like, you know what, God, childlike faith, you can do anything, do something. So for anyone that works in the news industry, they know that right before the show is not the time that your news director is going to come just chat with you or have a talk with you. Well, I prayed that and I looked up and my news director was like, hey, Christina, can you come talk to me for a second? And I was like, this is weird. If this has anything to do with my prayer, okay, God, like, this is you. And he pulls me in and he's like, I wanted to know about how long you were thinking about doing this job, this career, because I want to send you to some trainings. And literally, like, I was excited to be like, oh, forever, he wants to send me to trainings. And God was like, okay, you just asked me to do something. I did it. Are you going to obey? So I was like, ugh. So I said, actually, I was just about to put my 2 weeks in. And when it came out, he was like, shocked, and I was shocked, and I was like, yeah, so what would you like me to do next? And he sent me to this other person, like the GM or something's office, and I filled out paperwork, put in the 2 weeks, and started working for FCA. And it was at FCA. I was there for only, I think, 2.5 years or something, but I learned that my passion at the time was, and really what God had anointed me for in that season, was being relatable to students, and especially student athletes. And that I found that wherever I went, the students would gravitate towards me, or they'd actually listen to me and do what I said and want to learn from me. And I found so much passion in that because, like I said, the hardest times in my life were my junior and senior year of high school. So to have these juniors and seniors and really 9th and 10th graders as well come to me and be like, hey, like, can you give me advice on this? I was like, please let me give you advice on this. So I worked, but during that time, there was a high school located right next door to where I was working. And I had played volleyball in college. And to be honest, I wanted a little bit of extra money. So I said, I want to go see if they need a volleyball coach. So I went over to the public school and they had an opening and I started being their volleyball coach. And again, even though it was in a public school, I realized, geez, they can tell that I'm a Christian, and they can tell that I have wisdom that's not coming from me, but it's coming from God. Because, I'd have students that would come up to me and players that would say, "Can you pray with me?" And I'm like, how do they even, you know what I mean? So I began at that moment when I realized the influence that I had with those students. I would go to that school and I would literally, this is going to make me cry again. This podcast is making me cry, which must mean it's pretty impactful. You must definitely be doing a God thing here, because these tears don't come as frequently anymore. But I would go to this track and I would pray every day around the school. Every Sunday I'd go after church and I would pray prayers around the school for 2 years. And I would say, "God, I feel like you're calling me to be a teacher so I can be full time with these students." And God's like, "Okay, not yet though." And so every day, every Sunday for 2 years, I'd go and pray for my future students, for my staff that I would work with in faith, knowing that if I'm not there yet, I know that I'll be there when God wants me to be. And eventually, 2 years later, they called me and they said, "We have a position for you." And it's a reading position, and it's for students who can't pass the state standardized assessment. So they're really frustrated and they can't graduate high school unless they pass this test. And we want you to be the teacher for that. And so I continued to coach and teach at that high school. I kept coaching. I saw all my girls on my volleyball team gave their lives to Christ almost every year. And one year, I think I almost got in trouble for that, but I was in this mentality of you know what? These are souls. I wanted people to experience the joy that God had given me, especially at that young age, because I was so lost. And my best friend at the time, well, he still is my best friend, but my best friend in 2015, Rashad, Jennings, called me one day and he was like, "I just love what you're doing with the students, and I have a foundation, and I really would love for you to run it." And I was like, "No, I'm never leaving these kids. No way. What do you mean?" And I prayed about it. And of course, like God normally does, when we say, "No, I'm not doing something," he's like, "Yes, you are." So I ended up leaving teaching and leaving that school after coaching there for 7 years and teaching there for 3, and ran this foundation for another 3 years. And all that to say, God, the last 10 years, God, I'm now working for the National Football League. So he took the pieces, in hindsight, I see this process of where God took every year since giving my life to him and used it for his good, from starting off in the broadcast industry because I loved sports, to going into, okay, now you love sports, I get that, but you're going to work with kids because they listen to you, but you're still going to be able to do sports. And now you're going to actually teach reading with that, because in 3 years after that, you're going to run a foundation that's focused is reading and students. And I was going to prepare you for that all along, because all those 8 or 9 years leading up to it, the National Football League is going to offer you a position to then work on a global scale for kids in the community. So it's just a crazy long story, but that's it.
What is do you say Rashad Jennings? Is that the name you said? Your friend?
Yes.
What was the foundation that you worked at for 3 years?
The Rashad Jennings Foundation.
Oh, it was that name.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was from there that you got the call from the NFL.
Yes.
And that's been fairly recent.
Yeah, I just started 3 months ago. So it's all fresh.
It blows my mind, just the whole journey. And this reminds me of a conversation we've had on here before, but this idea of when we're running our race in our place, when we're being faithful to what's right in front of us, the things that God does, in the doors that he opens, and because I'm sitting there thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have a hard time imagining you at 21 or whatever, doing the sportscasting, being like, yeah, this is basically just going to hold me over till the NFL calls. And I work for them. No big deal.
Seriously.
And, but then here you are. And it wasn't this pursuit of the, working for the NFL. It was this pursuit of God. Where would you have me? Who have you put in my path today? All of those questions that you asked, what would you have me to say to someone? And step by step, and God just, okay, you've been faithful here. Now now I'm calling you here. And even your faithfulness to step into the next thing, I just think is incredible, because I don't want to, easy is probably the wrong word, but no one would have blamed you for staying with the teaching thing, that you were like, right. I love this and this is awesome. And there's fruit in this ministry, like kids are coming to know Christ. But for you to have the courage to say, I love this, but God is saying there's a next step. Like now I need to step out. And I just wonder too, like if you had not taken that step for those 3.5 years, then you wouldn't be where you're sitting right now. But
exactly.
Man, just the God honoring obedience.
That is like the theme of my walk with God, to be honest. I mean, and it makes me tear up because, to be completely transparent, in October, my grandfather, he was like a dad to me. He passed away from brain cancer. And I had 31 days with him to really, and thankfully I was able to lead him to the Lord, which is like the sweetest memory I could ever have. But when I applied for this NFL job because it had crossed my path a few times, and I wasn't going to apply because I was very happy and content and fulfilled. I worked from wherever I wanted. I created things at the foundation, and I felt like God had said, I want you to apply. And I fought that for a long time because I was content and I was happy, and fruit, like you said, was producing constantly. But when God says to do something, even when you're uncomfortable, you just have to do it. And you have to have that trust for God to believe him at his word when he says he can do exceedingly and abundantly more anything that we can ask, think, or imagine. And so I applied, and every night from October to February in the interview process, I prayed literally every night, maybe multiple times a day. I said, God, if this is your will, open the door and offer it. And if it's not, close it. Don't let me go through this entire process to just be confused when they actually offer me the position. And so 10 interviews later, when the HR person called me, and God is so strategic and in the details of our prayers. People that know me, and you guys will get to know me, but my heart is very pure in the sense and humble to say that the HR person said, Christina, the 6 executives that you just interviewed with here at the office, that you were in the top 3 out of 1,200 applicants, and it was a unanimous decision. I was like, what? Like, God knew that I needed to hear that for more confirmation that this is him. This isn't a mistake. This isn't a blooper. It wasn't something that they didn't, really take their time in deciding. And so when they offered me the position, I cried, and I cried because I didn't want to leave where I was. And I didn't even cry, to be honest, with the happiness of, oh my gosh, I just got this position. It was, I don't want to leave where I am because I'm so happy, but I know that God is calling me here because he wants me here. Again, when God leads you somewhere, he will provide confirmations. I remember earlier last year, before I even knew about this job opening, oh, this is crazy. Let me tell you, I completely forgot about 2 things actually. But one thing was I went to a birthday dinner in Florida, and I met up with my friends, and one of the girls was late, and she was like, oh, I have this birthday present for you. I felt led to get this for you. And I opened it, and it was a giving key, and it said courage on it. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. So then I go out up to the parking lot to say bye to my other friend who was at the dinner with us. And she walks up to me, I kid you not, and she didn't even see what this girl had given me. And she goes, I just feel like telling you that God is going to give you courage in the midnight hour. And I looked at her and I said, Erica, did you not realize that Stephanie just gave me this necklace that said courage on it? I'm like, why is God telling me this courage word? And I think like a month later, I went to the airport, and this guy at baggage claim was wearing a shirt that literally just said courage on it. So all that to say, God had been speaking that word to me up until when I got this position that was offered to me. And it also turns out that my boss, I had met in a field in a ministry in Haiti 5 years before. So, so he's in the details, and when he calls you, he will remind you of how he chose to get you in the process that he was in all along.
I think my favorite part, even of you just sharing that, is just how poised you were to hear from God, because was it, I don't remember which famous pastor spoke these words that, God speaks 1,000 times a day, but what do we actually hear? And for you to just have your eyes open, your ears open. And again, I feel like that comes back to your prayer of, okay, God, just speak, show me, like you were looking for it. You weren't shut down to it. And I just think it's beautiful. Even like, think about the guy with the t-shirt. You could have been so busy looking at your phone, doing your thing, whatever, that it could have been so easily missed. But instead it becomes just one of these beautiful moments of God speaking directly to you, and how intimate that is, that relationship with him, when it's not just this global message to everyone, have courage, but like, hey girl, I know this journey that I've called you on. I know and recognize that this is a decision that's going to take a lot of courage for you. And so I'm going to send you message after message after message to like, just remind you that it's worth it. Have courage.
Exactly. And in Jeremiah, I think it's 3:33 or 33:3, something like that. But it says, when you seek me, you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. And I always hold God to that. Like, hey, I'm seeking you. Like, I want to see you. And there's also another scripture in Matthew, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. So I always pray, God, give me a heart like yours, because then your word says that I'll see you. I'll see you in the people around me. I'll see you in nature. I'll see you everywhere. And I think that, we said earlier, you can't miss God's will for your life. Like, you shouldn't be so obsessed of God's will for your life. Just follow him. But like, in order to follow him, you actually have to follow him, and you have to have a heart that wants to see what he's doing. And like I said, from the very beginning of this, it's the most adventurous path you'll ever take and journey. And it amazes me every time the God stories that come out of it. And I always say, God is not a boring God. And God gives me these exciting stories of not coincidence, situations, but of his stories that he orchestrated perfectly, because he wants to get the glory out of it. And he wants to do that in everyone's life if they're willing to say, okay, God, what are you willing to do through me? Or what do you want to do through me today? What do you want me to see today? And how am I going to see you today? And just show up. And it's not always easy. It's not like every day I'm going to have these crazy, amazing God stories, because there are times where God wants to put us through refinement in those quiet places. There were, the story sounds exciting, but there were seasons where I was working in a cube and for like 6 months as an assistant, and like, God, why did you call me here again? Like, what am I doing here? But there I would learn how to create a website, or I'd learn how to do project management, or I learned how to be organized. Or when I was a teacher and I had to do 60 kids in 2 different rooms at one point, and I was like, God, what am I doing? He was teaching me how to manage. Now with the NFL, I'm managing all these different initiatives. Yeah. If I didn't learn that there, I wouldn't be where I am today. So it's learning to embrace the good. Everything's good, really. We say the bad, but God said it all works out together for good in Romans 8:28. So, I think it's all about perspective too. So
I feel like I have to ask the question, even though it almost makes it sound like I know anything about the NFL, but I just feel the need to say I know very little about the NFL. But first of all, what is your title? Like, what do you do now?
Yes, I'm manager of community relations. The NFL has, you see players giving back in the community and using their platform for good and impacting communities. From a league level, we have different initiatives that we kind of sprinkle down into our clubs, and we just help facilitate that and to implement that and to give our players and our teams the opportunities to give back. So ironically, and I hate that word too, because God was definitely in that, I manage Crucial Catch, which is the cancer awareness initiative. And my grandfather, the one that died 4 days after I applied for this job, died of brain cancer. So it's just super, it's super a God thing. And I also manage Walter Payton Man of the Year, which is an award given at NFL Honors during Super Bowl week, the night before Super Bowl. And then I work with Salute to Service, which is our military appreciation initiative, and just really teaching guys and helping teams to use their resources to give back to those communities. And I love it.
That's awesome. And your current season of life, you're single, right? You're not married.
I am single, and I know that we're going to have a lot of NFL listening fans on here. So,
so then with your connections with the NFL and being single, what percentage of a chance that you might marry Tim Tebow? Like every single one of my single friends wants to.
oh my gosh. If I've actually, I've been asked that question a lot of times because people always refer me to the female Tim Tebow. But I did actually have an awesome opportunity to work with Tim. They, I think it was 2013, his foundation asked me to be the host for their annual celebrity golf tournament and gala. Okay. And he's just a really, really good guy. So I don't know the percentage of marrying. I don't know what God has for him. But if a man can find me that is as godly and loves sports as Tim, then that would be awesome.
Well, if it doesn't work out with you and Tim, if you could maybe put in a word for my friend Christine with him, I think she would basically love me for life.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. I got her.
Oh, so tell me then, just real quickly, what does kind of this season of life, as far as just day to day, look like for you? I know you've moved to New York City, which is awesome. I mean, I hope you think it's awesome. Maybe the jury's still out. There's probably parts that are awesome and parts that aren't. But you live in New York City, obviously, new job, totally nowhere near Florida. What is the season of life, this place that God has you in your race? What does that look like right now?
Man, my race. Well, like you said, I moved from Florida to New York. That was the biggest move I've ever made in my entire life. I was really excited, and I still am, but I'm not used to walking everywhere. But it's not just the walking. It's like, okay, I need to wake up at this time, check the train calendar, like the train schedule, make sure everything's on time. Am I going anywhere after work? I need to take another pair of tennis shoes and my heels because I'm not wearing heels to work, like walking to 8th Avenue, I'm learning how to live here. And the thing that brings me peace is, as crazy and hectic as it is with so many people, which is not usually my style. I love my alone time and like the suburban areas. I know that God has me here. And so that brings me a lot of peace. Again, I think in this season, in this race that I'm in this season, it's just being obedient every single day. I have the opportunity to learn from some amazing professionals in the industry who are just connecting me with other amazing professionals in the industry. And I don't take it lightly, and I love it. So just really learning from the best and asking God every day, okay, what do you want me to do today? And then he surprises me. So in, 10 years from now, when I'm 40, I can get back on here and be like, hey, look what God did the last 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably a way pre-release announcement, but I still think it's worthy of noting that you are in the process of writing a book.
I am in the process.
Which I have had enough people who have written books and have shared is an adventure. All in and of itself is an adventure to write a book. But do you have any kind of like ballpark, we're aiming for this for releasing?
Yeah, I would say in the next year and a half. I'm really in the early stages of it. I've connected with an editor. I really had the blessing to, when I worked with Rashad with his foundation, he is actually coming out with a book on May the 8th called The If in Life. It's an awesome Christian book about his story. So again, that's another thing where God gave me the opportunity to learn how to write proposals, to get in contact with publishers, and was just leading up into this moment. So my story, I really have this message in my heart for women that God can really take all of the ashes and turn them into beauty, all the things, all the pain that we've been through, and it's something that I think as women, at least for me, I'm always like, well, that's kind of cliche. I hear that all the time. But I always say, you know, when you hear things repeated so many times, it's usually because they're important. And this is super important. It's truth. It's that no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done, or even what you're doing today or did 5 minutes ago, God will use it for your good, and there's purpose that can come out of it. So the whole book is really about that. It's about being purpose driven as a woman and taking what you've been through and realizing that it could really turn into something beautiful.
Amen. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited. Let me know when you do the whole, what is it? I can pre-order or join some sort of like, we'll read it over. I'm all in.
Yay. I love that.
So writing a book, obviously living in New York City, working for the NFL. And then the final thing I want to make sure I mention so people know is you also have a podcast.
I do. I have a podcast.
Which I just learned as we were talking. So it's so exciting. The Set Apart Women's, is it women or women's?
Women.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will go ahead. We will tag that in our show notes, but they should definitely check that out because that's pretty awesome. How long have you been doing it?
So about 3 years ago, God put it on my heart to have a morning call at 7:00 a.m., which I am not a morning person, and to pray with women and to have this open like conference line to pray and give like a brief 10-minute message every morning, Monday through Friday. And I did it for about a year by myself. And when I say that was being obedient, because sometimes I would wake up with like one eye open and one eye closed. But God said, okay, you've been faithful this last year. I want you to turn it into an organization called the Set Apart Women. It's created for women who know that they're created for more. And so it's a community, and it's also, so the setapartwomen.org. And then there's also the Set Apart Women podcast. It's on iTunes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listeners definitely should check that out. Before we let you go, Christina, I have one final question for you, if you're up for it.
I'm up for it.
What I really want to know, other than, you know, whether you're going to marry Tim Tebow, is what is the most superficial thing about you?
The most superficial thing. So my friends are going to laugh when they listen to this because they know it's super true. I don't like using this term, but it pretty much sums it up. So like diva isn't fully the word, but like this word bougie, it's like they always use this word on me when we are like going out of town or going to a restaurant. I have this personal thing, and this is so bad. I have this personal thing that if I'm going to spend money somewhere, I'm not spending it on a chain restaurant. I want to spend it on like some local, you know, so whenever I go somewhere, my friends are like, okay, we know we can't go eat at TGI Fridays. So, and also I really love to pay for the experience. So I'm like, if I'm going to give $20, I want $20 with like lights around me, like outside Christmas lights, or like flowers on the table, or a live band, or something that I could really get a bang for my buck. So I would say that my friends would definitely say I'm a little high maintenance in that area, but it's for good reason. It's because I don't want to waste. I want to maximize my dollars that I so hardly try to earn every day.
Listen, all of our superficial things are for good reason.
Of course they are.
And the staying local, the experience, girl, we're kindred spirits in this. I am a big fan. I hope you are getting to experience all of New York City and the delicious food options and experiences, because you have a lot there.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. I will say that it is so expensive.
Oh, yeah. Crazy.
It's ridiculous. Like, people told me and warned me of how expensive it is. But now that I'm up here, I'm really trying to become friends with the grocery store people. Maybe they'll give me a discount because it is crazy.
Well, I'm headed to New York City, let me think, next month. Maybe if you're in town, I'll bring you out. I'll show you one of my fave, less expensive taco joints that I could just sit and eat tacos all day.
Listen, tacos and queso are my favorite.
Yes.
I could literally eat Mexican quesadillas every day.
Then, girl, it's a date. It's going to be a good time.
Can't wait.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate so much just everything you had to share. And yeah, so grateful that you gave us your time.
I'm so thankful. Thank you for having me.